webinar will begin shortly, and we are actually right there. I saw a couple of notices there. Yeah, Minnesota in September. I lived in Minnesota for 2 years, so probably right now it's about 55 degrees. I was just in London last week, and I think it's on about the same level on the map there. So that was about 55 degrees. It felt amazing after being in this 105-degree weather in Texas, which is finally looking like it's going to break down and collapse into the low 90s later this week. So super excited about that. So let's just dive right into this. So we're going to be talking about turning point secrets. And for those of you that are familiar with the Voodoo lines, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about there. And if you're not, you are about to be pleasantly surprised, since this is an area that I did not, I wasn't aware of, well, until David pestered me for 6 months via email saying, look, I've been following your stuff. You really should take a look at what I'm doing, because I get a lot of that. And I was like, yeah. And I finally talked to him on the phone. I was just like, okay, well, this guy's a genius, and these levels are pretty amazing. So the question is, what are these Voodoo lines, as we call them? So first of all, welcome everybody. So I never joined the military, but I grew up in a military family, all right? So that's my dad. He was in the Vietnam War. That's my great-grandfather, Good. He was in World War I, and my grandfather was in World War II. And the reason I bring this up is that although I didn't join the military myself, I went on to study military history, and I always had a huge respect for it. But I also became a big fan, what's the right word here, of just, it's not necessarily, I mean, discipline, yes, but rigorous structure. And because I remember growing up with that, and that was just kind of the whole, here's your routine, here's the levels and stuff like that. And so what I like about these Voodoo lines is they immediately provide a rigorous structure to your trading, and take away all of, not all, but take away a lot of the guesswork. All right. So what are these things? So here's the S&P 500. All right, and as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of 10x bars, obviously the squeeze. I like to look at volume. So here's a daily chart of the S&P 500, the SPX, and so patterns and stuff like that too. So the idea, of course, in trading is we're trying to always find an edge, right? And there's certainly going to be some times where you're in a trade in this, this has happened to me over the last week, where like I'm short stuff and it just explodes higher. It's like, man, I wonder where did that come from? And of course, there's other times when it's like, oh, great, there's a squeeze here, and you make bank. But the question here is just kind of going like, well, the price action here, is this being contained anyway? And really, going back to that military analogy, is there any structure here that we could apply to this scenario that we're not seeing in the chart that's right in front of us, right? So here's the same chart with the Voodoo lines. Okay, let me go back here. So here's that chart, right? And now here I'm adding the Voodoo lines. It's like, okay, what is this? So what are these things? Well, a couple of things here. First of all, the red line here, we call it the fire line. It's the biggest one. It's the big daddy. It's the big papa. It's the place where markets go to reverse. Markets head to, like, on a quest, and where rallies go to die. Okay, so you got to keep that one in mind. And then from there, the second most powerful one is the green lines, and that's the tree line. And then the third most powerful one is the snow line, and that's the white one. Okay, and so you can see here that if we go back, to, here, and it's like, okay, so if you're looking at this, it's like, okay, well, gosh, we're coming up here and there's no squeeze, but we're probably going to keep going higher. But if you know in advance that there is a situation like this, where we're sandwiched in between two snow lines and there's no squeeze, guess what? Iron Condor City. And you just keep doing iron condors until there is a squeeze that develops that, guess what, is going to take you out of that. And so once you start to see this stuff, it becomes pretty amazing. So here's dollar yen. Okay, dollar yen, of course, is crucial. Now, I typically look at the yen futures, so I want to make sure that we understand that the yen futures are the inverse of the dollar yen. So yen futures, basically one is priced yen to dollars, the other is dollar to yen. However, for Voodoo lines, I look at dollar yen, which is the spot market. So basically for yen futures, if they're going down, that is good for stocks. Well, if yen futures are going down, this is going up. So just, I know it might be a little confusing if you're not familiar with that. However, now we can throw on, boom, the Voodoo lines, and we can see that, by the way, but sometimes the best signals in the stock market happen in the yen, right? If there's a squeeze in the yen and this fires long, which means yen futures are going lower, look for the stock market to explode higher. Along the same lines, though, if dollar yen comes down to Voodoo line, guess what? It's going to bounce, and that's going to also cause stocks to move as well. So you can use this for signals in the yen to take trades in, get a heads up on what's going to happen in the stock market. So what about individual stocks? Here's CRM, boom. So now we can look at this and say, wow, look at the structure of how this moves. I think one thing that's important to note here, and I guess I maybe haven't said this yet, is if you guys are familiar with pivots, right? I'm a fan of pivots. I wrote about pivots in my book, Mastering the Trade. They're great for, you know, you take the high-low close of the previous day or the previous 2 days, and it sets up levels for your day for today. These don't move. So this level here, the fire line at 117.91, this has been there since David started doing this, okay? And whether you're looking at a 5-minute chart or you're looking at a daily chart, okay, that level is going to be right there. And guess what? It's going to be there tomorrow, and it's going to be there next week, and it's going to be there next year. So these don't change. And because these don't change, they provide a structure with which you can execute your own trades and you can plan in advance. That's what's really fascinating about this. So 10-year notes, and this is an older chart of the 10-year notes, but I'm going to show you a little bit later in the presentation a more recent chart of the 10-year notes. And these things, this level here has been traded against for about a decade, okay? Tree line, tree line, tree line, tree line. So just keep in mind, those big levels are out there. They're invisible if you are not aware of it. If you're not aware of that level, it's like, oh my God, I wonder why this market just reversed all of a sudden. If you are aware of it, and yeah, there's going to be times, you know what, it's going to push through it by a few ticks, right? But you wouldn't believe how many times they'll come to this level exactly and turn. Not on news, you know, not on anything like that, just because those levels are there. So what about day trades? I do this with day trades too. So here's the S&P futures. This is a trade that we had done in the room. And it's like, all right, we came down to the fire line. You always buy the fire line. You always buy the fire line, right? And I wimped out here. I got 5 points and I took my profits and ran. That's part of sometimes being in the room. You're under pressure to, you know, like I want to, you know, I feel like I've got an obligation to like, all right, hey, we've got some money here. Let's take it. But as you can see here, this literally the moment I took my profit, we turned it into a squeeze and we kept going higher. And that's okay. I mean, I'm not, you know, not crying over spilt milk. The main point here though is that this was a solid level. And instead of sitting there and waiting for a trigger, okay, it's like, oh, I'm gonna wait for confirmation. No. You just buy it because it's against the fire line. So that's kind of cool. So the bottom line here is that this is the mainstay. This is the mainstay of nearly all of our trading on a lot of different on a lot of different levels. These levels don't move. They allow us to plan in advance. They allow us to see in advance where a move is likely to terminate. Right? That's huge. One of the things I love about this is I can see like, man, here's a big old fire line sitting down there, and I'm going to go on vacation. I'm gonna use my Theo price tool. I'm gonna place an order, and if for some reason we come down to this level while I'm traveling, I want a piece of that. Right? I call that an if-then trade. If the market goes down to the fire line, whatever I'm watching, Microsoft, the bonds, oil, if it goes down to that fire line, I'm a buyer. Like I don't care. If I'm traveling and I can't watch it, I'll trade small. I'll risk the debit. I'll risk whatever it is. But all I know is that I don't want to stare at the screen and happen to be watching when that happens, because I know where the fire line is. I can place my order in advance and I can go to the beach. It's one of my favorite trades to do. All right. So the question is, what are they? Okay, and Justin, you just hit the nail on the head. How are these fire lines and tree lines determined? So here's the thing. I would love to be able to say, guys, I am so intelligent that I figured this out on my own, but that is absolutely not the case. As I mentioned before, I was minding my own business, and I got a couple of emails from David, and he was just reaching out and saying, look, I know, you've got you got the squeeze, and I like the squeeze, and I use it. You really ought to take a look at these. And I'm like, yeah. And so again, I finally got on the phone with him, talked to him. It's like, okay, this guy, he was, and I would say following along at a rate of about 73% of what he was saying. This guy was a mad scientist talking about his theories, all this kind of different stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh. So all of this stuff basically came out of his brain, literally mad scientist. And I mean that as a compliment. When he would go through and explain to me all the stuff that was in it, I was like, okay, you lost me about halfway through. All I know is that when price went there, it stopped and turned, and I can trade with that. So I thought at this point, the best idea would be to introduce you to David Starr. And I'm going to hand this over to him for about 15 minutes and let him kind of talk for a little bit, and kind of explain the origin story around this. So David, I will hand this over to you.
Hey, thanks, John, and hopefully we've got audio going. And thank you everyone for spending a little bit of time with us this evening. I just want to let you know, as we're starting to dig in, the picture that John's got up there, that really isn't me. Although my wife is going to be the first one to tell you that when I'm deep in an R&D project, that's kind of what my office looks like. And I'm doing R&D stuff pretty often. I wear the mad scientist title proudly. Thanks, John, for that. And I'm always looking for ways to create something new. Voodoo Lines was an outgrowth of something like that. And happy to be able to tell you about it tonight. I see the names of a lot of Voodoo Lines users in the chat room tonight. And even if you're not a Voodoo Lines user, you might even already use one of my inventions. Virtually every smartphone manufacturer on the planet has licensed some of my patented wireless technology from a long time ago. That was several careers ago. For over a decade, I've been focused exclusively on trading, and I've been an active trader and investor from well beyond that. As far as my trading approach, I do a lot of work with Elliott Wave, other things also, but a lot of work with Elliott Wave, and it plays an important role in my trading and in Voodoo Lines. So let's talk about that as a way to start talking about Voodoo Lines, because you might have heard about Elliott Wave, you might already use it, you might have tried it and said this is way too complicated and gotten frustrated. You might have heard from others that hey, this Elliott Wave stuff is powerful, but too difficult to learn. Or you might have heard someone say, hey, it only works in hindsight. All of those things are true, especially the hindsight piece. And I've got an Elliott Wave chart up on my screen. You can see I've got, all these crazy numbers and letters here. This is one of the scenarios I've been looking at that was saying, hey, we might come down to 2,300 before going back up. I don't think that's what's going on now. And that's one of the problems, right? Is that you put all these labels on your chart and then the market doesn't care. It's going to go wherever it wants. And there's no way to know whether these things are right. No Elliott Wave analyst can tell you whether these things are right. At best, they can tell you whether they're consistent with current price action. And if this was an Elliott Wave webinar, I'd spend a lot of time talking about how you can still make use of the tool, even without that. But we're not going to dig into that because, like I mentioned, it's hard, right? So one of the things that I did is I put on this R&D hat that I told you about, right? And many of my best inventions, including voodoo lines, came from taking problems and sort of turning them completely on their head. Right? Because looking at things a new way can often give us, right, some of our best inventions, and that's how voodoo lines comes about. So let's take that well-known limitation about Elliott wave that we talked about. It only works in hindsight, right? And look at that from a different angle, right? Because it's just the emphasis that makes that a negative. It only works in hindsight. It makes it so easy to just dismiss the whole thing, right? And then you miss the most important word in the sentence. It works, right? It works. That's the most important word in the sentence. It only works in hindsight, but that still means it works. So we want to use Elliott wave to tell us, right, about the current market by going back to the hindsight stuff. So the confusion in Elliott wave is what's going on here, right? Just about everyone who does Elliott wave agrees on what happened way back here. So if I can find some way to use all the stuff that everybody agrees about with something that everyone says is a powerful technique and make it relevant to the current market, then that would be really cool. And that's what Voodoo Lines does. So look, here's the S&P. This isn't current. I know John's got a current chart, and we were both trading this today using the Voodoo Lines, and you trading it pretty much the same way, which is cool. But this is August, right? This was the month of August, and it's really easy to come in now and draw these lines in, right? I mean, we have so many touches at these same spots, right? A 3-year-old could draw these horizontal lines. But as John mentioned, these lines have been here for years and years and years. Back when, from when the S&P was hundreds, thousands of points lower, these lines were here ready for us to use when it got here. And you can see how, down from the all-time high, we've got this less important skyline up here. We break, kiss it goodbye, and then break that upper snow line. And it does a classic little voodoo move, gives it a kiss goodbye from below to show that it wants to stay below it, and tests the lower snow line, right? Again, to the upper snow line, right? Come down to a skyline, upper snow line. This is that orderly movement that John was talking about. This was the month of August, and you knew where the levels to watch were well before we even got there. I have this one highlighted just because it provided a great little short intraday or morning gap up right into the level, and we talked about selling this in the futures room, right? Gap up into here, it provided a good quick short, not one to stay with. And again, like I said, I know John wants to show you some current stuff with the S&P in a little bit, but you can see today, where did we end up? If you look at your charts, we ended up today pretty much exactly at this voodoo skyline, and that how price interacts with that is likely to tell us where we're going to go next. So this is why we're always saying voodoo lines uncover the hidden levels of potential support and resistance, and it lets you draw them in here before we get here instead of after. Now, if you've been trading for a while, you probably already have a preferred way to trade support and resistance. Voodoo lines can fit into whatever tools you already use. Now, personally, I like to use the ready, aim, fire. That's what I've got down here. That's another one of my inventions, and you can see it gave some great sell signals up at these upper snow lines, some great buy signals at the lower ones. So, that's how I like to do it. But we'll we'll certainly be looking at ways that you can integrate this into just about any other set of tools that you already use. Now, these the S&P levels that we were looking at, they were really good for trading in the month of August and still good now. But let's look at something more recent, right? Let's look at crude oil, because this has been crazy, right? We had this huge jump up Sunday night, and then after Monday's high, right back down again. What you don't see, if you don't have voodoo lines, right, is how it came down to this very important tree line here, right? It's the second most important level behind these fire lines. And it's moved very methodically, right? Up to a snow line, back to a skyline, up to a skyline, down to a skyline. And when it jumped up, this huge jump up, where did it exhaust? $63.38. There is a voodoo skyline at $63.39, 1 penny away. Sorry about the penny. Now this was not one of the most important levels, and fading the fourth largest one-day move ever is probably kind of bold. If you did it at this level, you probably would have been pretty good. I didn't, right? It would have been fun, but remember, these fire lines are the most important level. And a trade that we did, we did some of these trades in the futures room live yesterday here in this market when it was coming back down. We had pretty much a classic move. This is I captured this screenshot when we were live in the futures room yesterday. I love these moves when we come down, and you can see even intraday, right? Very orderly. Down from this, down from a skyline, down to a skyline, bounce a little bit, down to a skyline, and right back up to test the fire line from below. And I told folks then, we want to sell this here. It may not continue, so we want to be careful, but it's a really good place to be selling this with a tight stop. And the way this trade came together, right? The plan we talked about at the time, let it come down, take some quick profits, partial profits, and then see if it continues. Well, it didn't continue, so I took half, right? Took the other half when it came back up. I know some other folks in the room were more aggressive about getting out. They had a great little trade intraday. It had one more visit to this important fire line, and then started coming down sharply. So so this was a situation. I didn't sell the fire line this time. I waited till it came down, and I want to talk more about that way of doing it in a little bit, because there really are a couple of different ways that you can use the voodoo lines. Certainly one of them is selling directly at these levels, and that worked here. I think if you tried to sell when it came back below again this time, that also would have worked. The way I handled things is I waited for this to come down a little bit, and then when at the end of the day it wouldn't break this skyline down here, going into the evening with some pretty good exposure in full-size crude contracts, I just got out of the rest of them. Yeah, we're down further here today. That's fine. I sold some mini crude up here as well, and I'm still running that. And today we've come down. Basically, our low has tried to break, but hasn't yet broken this snow line down here, and we'll see what happens there next. So, a couple of things about this and the multiple ways of looking at this, and why did I sell not at the level, but when it was coming down. So I've got a lot of folks who use the Voodoo lines, and I work with a lot of different traders with a lot of different backgrounds and levels of experience. I mean, one user used to trade for Lehman before they went under. Now he trades for himself from home. He told me he doesn't use a single other indicator on his chart except for the Voodoo lines. And we saw how the swings in crude came, directly from Voodoo lines, highs and lows. We've got the same sort of thing in Amazon right here, right? The all-time high right up here against the fire line. It got there last year, couldn't break through on multiple tries, went right back to the fire line this year, couldn't get through. And that, so if you're like that gentleman, or a few other really experienced traders, an ex-pro trader who's been in the business for 4 decades, always tells me, give me a level, I can trade it. If that's your attitude, then, right, because that's how a lot of these guys are, right? They're used to trading levels. Then they get the Voodoo lines on their chart, they love it, they're happy, and you can see why, because the levels are good. Right now, if that's not your bent, right, or you're not that experienced with it yet, I think you're actually in a better position to learn how to use the Voodoo lines, right? Because there's a lot that you can learn about the methodical way that price moves from level to level. So John told you these are fire lines are more important, and the tree lines are next most important, and then come the snow lines. Well, what does that mean, more important and less important? Well, at one level, it just means that the larger swings tend to come from the more important levels. But there is also a very methodical way that if the price is moving from fire line to fire line, that it interacts with the tree lines along the way, right? And similarly, when it moves between those other levels, that it interacts with the snow lines along the way. And by learning how to view those methodical movements, you can build what I call maps of the market. It's a plan, right? It doesn't tell us exactly where everything's going to go up front. We can never know. But it, as John told you before, gives you a way to plan for these market movements in a what if sort of way that coincides with levels that the market typically tends to move at. And so going through all of how we do those, you build those maps, is more than we can cover tonight. So, so we're going to do a class. We try and do these once a year. We're going to do a class next week specifically on how to build those, and a couple of days of live trading. We did this last year, and last year we were trading Amazon. So this chart is a little bit blurrier than the other charts we've looked at. I'm sorry for that. I wanted to grab this from the recording directly from the live trading we did last year. And we already had a map. We're planning out. This was the first day of our live trading last year, and our map said, "Look, we are looking for this to come up to the fire line and or the tree line, sorry, and sell off." And this is not me saying this now, because hindsight, yeah, all the charts look look good, but this is what we were doing last year. December of last year, came up here and we were saying, we want to sell this. I'm just going to go back to the last slide really quickly, right? It's because on a longer term basis, our map said this is methodically working its way lower. We want to sell into resistance at this level. So, so our first day of live trading last year, we're coming in and we're saying, we want to sell this here. We just want to buy Delta 70 puts, and we want to target the tree line below. And we made the plan up front. We talked about where we were getting in, where we were getting out, how we were going to manage it. And so even though we weren't live on the second day of live trading at the time, I mean, we were live in the afternoon, but we weren't here when it got to our target. So this is, again, captured from the recording of the live trading. But all we did on the day 3 days later was talk through how we all should have taken profits 140 points lower from where we got in 3 days, right? So so I definitely want, for anyone who uses Voodoo lines, for you at least to have the opportunity to understand how to draw these maps of the market. Look, if you just want levels to trade against, they work great. But if you want to learn the other piece as well, I love how it gives me a great insight into the trend and what direction I want to be trading at these levels. So look, I know John has some more stuff that he wants to tell you about, some more examples he wants to show you. I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to understand when he shows you, hey, look, I was trading here, I traded there because it went right to the line. I wanted to give you some insight into why it does that and how they're built. And of course, if you have a chance to join us next week, we can talk more about building the maps and those sorts of things. I just know one thing that comes up every time we talk about the Voodoo lines is what symbols do they work on? So we have a web page dedicated to that because these involve manual analysis for every symbol that that the Voodoo lines works on, even if it's just to do study the patterns that happened long enough ago that they're not in debate. It won't work on a symbol unless I've analyzed it. So I know that's a pretty long URL. So let me just post it in the alert section so that you guys can look above. If you want to grab that, you can all check and see if the things that you trade are in the Voodoo lines. And like I said, I'll be around. I know John has some more things he wants to show you. I'll be around for some Q&A later. But again, thanks for spending a little bit of time with me.
All right, thank you, David. So yeah, so now, I mean, as you guys can see, I mean, David has put a lot of work and a lot of thought into this. And so one of the things, or actually many of the things here that I have found is helpful is that, especially if you're in a routine like this where it's like, hey, David, your mic's open. If you wanna mute that, I can, just in case that comes up there. So what happens a lot of times is that, people will get excited and they'll buy something, and what they don't know is right up here is like a big fire line. So David was like showing you that example on Amazon, right? Or down here, when they get into this thing and it's like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world, and there's a huge tree line right there. So what's great about these is, again, they're in here all the time and they eliminate this. So if you're not aware of this, if this is a new phenomenon for you, what's nice about this is that it just takes this whole emotional roller coaster out of the picture. All right, so that part is super nice. So what I wanted to show you is just some screenshots from today. We had the FOMC meeting. So today I was watching, we were doing live trading in the small lot course. And initially there was this move down, and this is kind of a mogul line. So it's a minor Voodoo level, but it's important. And we're just kind of here, we're kind of here, we're kind of here. There's no squeezes. And as I'm watching this, it's like, you know what? It's holding. Now, I didn't buy this here. However, when it popped up here and we got the 821 EMA cross, I knew that I had to buy the stock market, because it's like, we're probably going to go up to to the skyline there. All right, so what did I do? I didn't want to do it with futures because in this environment, that would have been a little tricky. But so this is the one that we did live in the room today, or in the small lot class, where I bought the 29.95 SPX call that expired today, sold the 3,000 for I believe it was $1.50, and then we got out at 420, and that trade lasted about 15 minutes. On a 10 lot trade, it was good for $2,700. So it's moments like that where I just kind of like to be patient and wait for. And I find that anytime I try to force a trade, that's not really taking that into account, it's never a good idea. All right, so what about gold? I had a lot of questions on gold today. Oh my gosh, what should we do with gold? Well, guess what? It's just been ping-ponging here at this 15, 16 level with the spiral line, and it came down today, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. It stopped almost to the tick at the skyline and kind of bounced up from there. You will see this happen a lot where trades get boxed in, and they're just kind of hanging out there. One of my favorite trades is that when we're doing something like this and there's a squeeze, guess where the squeeze is going to take you? To the next level, right? Literally to the next level. So all of a sudden, this becomes a very structured environment instead of looking like random ping pong type moves. Microsoft is a stock that I've got 2 butterflies on right now. So the reason I've got a butterfly down here at 135 and up here at 140 is because there's open interest, but there's also some voodoo lines there that tend to attract that stock there, right? So if I look at these trades, I mean, right now, nothing really fantastic has happened with them, but I've got my 135 butterfly and my 140 butterfly with the idea that one of these will pay off come Friday, because not only do we have high open interest there, but there's some voodoo lines that act as kind of bouncers to keep out, to kind of keep it in check, right? So I'm kind of curious about that. Another stock that I have on right now is Yum. So Yum is a stock where, we had a squeeze here on a 78-minute chart. It was going. I was looking to see if we could potentially take out the highs, but it can't get through the snow line. Guess what? It came all the way down to the fire line. I was able to add to my position, and now we're bouncing up. Guess what? At a minimum, I'm looking for a test of 116.87. Why? Because I can plan this advance. I can see how much time it has spent at that level. Of course, it'd be awesome if it could go up to that next snow line, but I can work with that. I can make money within the structure that I've been given. Google is another one that where, there's a lot of eyes on the stock. What is it doing here? Well, it came up to the tree line, got terminated, came down almost to the penny to this tree line, snow line, snow line, snow line, bada boom, bada bing. And now we're just kind of seeing like, all right, what is this thing going to do? I've got a butterfly on here, just seeing if we could actually come back down to the skyline here. And that's going to be more up to quadruple witching and all that kind of stuff too. But ultimately, I am looking for it to go to that 1254 level. Yeah, and I do the Squeeze Pro. I use the Squeeze, and the Squeeze Pro obviously shows this and the Squeeze Pro as well, so that's a little bit more detailed. 10-year notes, right? A lot of talk about interest rates in the news. So they kind of peaked out here. We got the cross. You can see here that we hit this. So the way I look at this is, again, remember the snow line is the 3rd most important line, with the 2nd being the green tree line, the 3rd being the red fire line, the 4th is the blue skyline, okay? Now, so that's there, there, and there. And then the 5th is simply what we call, these are moguls, meaning they're pausing points along the way, okay? And you can see here that, yes, the skylines certainly kind of held this in check, but you can also see on a micro level that the moguls also kind of kept things in check as well. So as we're coming down here, it's like, oh, we bounce, boom, 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 boom. We kind of create a little bit of a sandwich. Guess what? Guess where the flags are formed? They're formed in between the voodoo lines. We come down here, we pause. We come down here, we pause. We come down here, we pause. And then this happens over and over again. And then we stopped almost to the tick at the snow line. All right, and guess what? This kept prices at bay for a while, and then it finally broke through. And so this is the kind of stuff that happens over and over and over again. So what about Johnson & Johnson? So right now I'm doing what I call the Johnson & Johnson sandwich trade. So you can see we're caught here in a sandwich between these two fire lines, right? So what I'm looking at with options expiration is that we could actually be stuck in a sandwich that pins closer to that $130 level. So this is a screenshot that I took about 4 minutes before the start of the webinar. But you can see right now that I've got an iron fly in place that basically benefits if we can stay near $130 by Friday expiration. So something we sold it at $2. Right now it's $1.39. So some decent open profits, certainly some more, but I have additional confidence in this simply because we are in what I call the Johnson & Johnson sandwich, right? So if you're into like expiration and you can get high open interest and it's near a Voodoo line, it's just an extra layer of icing on the cake, and which is always nice. So that's Johnson & Johnson. So Amazon, David had talked about this. This is one I'm also in as well. So of course we came down here, up here to the fire line, got rejected. We're here at the tree line. I'm right now have got a bet on that we could actually work our way back to 1800 by Friday's close, with the idea that we're going to stay contained within this little box here. So I've got a couple of different trades on in Amazon right now as a result of that. But mainly it's this call credit spread. Obviously, we need to come down, back to 1800 for that to work. Some butterflies here, and then my bigger trade is the $25 wide butterfly, 100 contracts there, which is responsible for right now most of these open profits. But this could turn into substantial profits if we could, pin at 1800. I'm not going to bank on that, but right now I'm hoping that the high open interest at 1800 and the Voodoo lines will help keep that in check. Okay, so that's Amazon. So anyway, so what are the Voodoo lines? For those of you that have these, you already know how great they are. These are a very, very premium tool, as you can see, because first of all, they require a lot of manual work on David's part. They're rare. This is something that you won't see out there anywhere else. This is not going to be ingrained on any platform. So normally on our site, these are $1,997. And the reason they're expensive like that is, again, it's not something that you buy and forget about it. But A, this is something that David has to maintain. And B, there's nothing else out there like this, okay? There's no ambiguity. The levels are there. They're based on information that can only be extracted by someone who's extremely familiar with how they're created. And last but not least, as you've seen, as we've gone through these slides, they work. And the reason I called them Voodoo lines is that I still to this day don't understand how or why they work, but they work, i.e. Voodoo. So what we do is normally these are $19.97 on the site and $97 a month. What we're doing tonight is that you can actually, instead of trying to sit there and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to get the futures one for $9.97, or I'm going to get the stocks one for $9.97 and $97 a month. This is the one that requires a lot of updates because we're continually not only adding new stocks, but also updating stocks. Instead, for tonight, you can get both for $9.97 and $47 a month, all right? So again, normally on our site, if you want to get these, it's going to be, well, I probably add that up wrong, but $19.94 plus $97 a month. If you're seeing this, then basically you can get futures or stocks for $9.97 if you like, or you can get the whole kit and caboodle for $9.97. So it's a significant savings, a 50% savings, and not something that we do very often for this. It is a very special tool, very premium. As a bonus with this, is that if you do get the tools, you're not going to be left to hang out to dry. David is going to do a deep dive class from 7 to 9 Central on September 23rd to really talk about what these are, okay? And then we're going to do a full day of live trading on September 24th and September 26th with a lunch in between. I believe I will be helping out with the one on Thursday. I can't remember, on one of those as well. So, question, is this a one-time fee or an annual recurring fee? So the $9.97 is a one-time fee, and then the monthly, there's that $47 a month fee. That's to make sure that you've got all the different updates. So another thing is that sometimes we'll have folks on here who bought the Voodoo lines and canceled the subscription, guess what? There's been a lot of updates, all right? And the good thing about that is that if you just go to this page, you just got to type this into your browser. So simplertrading.com/voodoo. You'll come to the page and you can scroll down, and we'll visit that page here in just a second so you can kind of take a look at it. But the main point here is that here you are. If you're intrigued by this, like no other tool that's out there, this is something that will pay for itself, not only quickly, but over and over again. And again, I want to emphasize, this is kind of a unique opportunity. Instead of getting it on our site, which by the way, if you'd rather just get it on our site for $19.94 and $97 a month, that's fine. But there's an opportunity here, instead of getting them, paying $9.97 for futures and then $9.97 and $97 a month for stocks, you can get both for a one-time payment of $997, a savings of 50%, and then a lower monthly update fee. All right, so it's a really huge, huge savings there. And then there's the bonuses and stuff like that too. So now, so what questions and stuff like that come up? Now, these are, so David, which, and feel free if there's anything here that you'd like to address or anything like that too, but I look at these mostly on TradeStation. I know they're also available for Thinkorswim. I know those are the two main platforms. Is there a subscription for futures? There's not. So the futures just don't update that much. There's only a handful of futures markets. Bonds, those levels have been there for 20 years. Whereas stocks, though, what'll happen is, as stocks make new highs, they got to be updated. And then as we find, because not every stock has Voodoo lines, right? A lot of times people in the room will say, hey, you know what? We're trading Roku. Can you add Voodoo lines to Roku? And David will, dig in and put on his mad scientist hat and get to work.
Yeah. So John, yeah, they work on TOS, they work on TradeStation, eSignal, NinjaTrader 7 only, not NinjaTrader 8. And then for futures only, if you use Sierra through Infinity, we have futures on Infinity through Sierra. So those are the platforms we have it on. As far as the updates, the futures, and we call it futures, right? But it's got the futures, it's got stock indices, it's got stock index ETFs, it's got some popularly traded Forex pairs. That version, it needs updates about once a year or so. Sometimes we'll go 2 years without an update. Sometimes there'll be 2 updates a year. The stock version, again, it's updated as needed. We try and target updates to the stock version about once a month. If you trade on TOS, it's pretty simple. You download the latest version, you import it. Every other platform, we've got technology, it just updates behind the scenes. You don't have to do a thing. So those are the platforms and the updates.
For commodities, yeah, so you've got the grain markets, wheat, all that kind of stuff is on there as well. In fact, yeah, I believe every futures market, I don't want to say every futures market, but I know all the major ones like that are gold, silver, grains, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and if you have a question about which symbols, again, just look up above the regular chat to the alerts section, and under my name there's a link to the list of all the symbols that the Voodoo lines are on. So yeah, we don't have lumber futures, we don't have usually I think we might have orange juice, but there are a few things we don't have, but most of the common actively traded futures contracts we have. So SP, no, the levels don't change every year, right? But it might be that once a year, one of the future symbols needs to change, or 3 of the index symbols need to change, and so we'll put out an update, right? That updates the levels, right? And so it's not every month that all the stocks get updated, but we just did an update earlier this week. You know, our last update was in August. We did one update here in September, and you know, we added 2 new stocks. We updated 2 others, right? And there were 250 approximate stocks that didn't change at all. And it's a very simple process. Like I said, in just about every other platform except for Toss, you just restart your platform. You'll have the new levels. If you use Toss, you just go to the website, you download the latest version, you go into the Edit Studies window in Toss, and you import the new indicators. It's that easy.
Yeah, and so in the live trading on Tuesday, I believe Danielle and David will be working together, and I believe on Thursday it'll be Henry and David working together. It'll, but they'll find the structure and the schedule will be set up there. But yeah, it's great to see it, because you can look at, when you look at the lines like that and say, oh, okay. But like anything, once you kind of see it in practice, you can see like, okay, well, how do people actually use this? And so it's good to bring different perspectives to it that way as well. Can you show us some examples? So Raju, I don't know. So I showed about 10 examples. So I don't know if you saw those earlier, but yeah, there's just different examples of different trades and things like that too. Is the live trading just on futures? No, it'll be on everything. So, well, by everything, I mean kind of, like stocks, typically utilizing options on stocks as well as futures. Is there a list of stocks that are currently supported? Yes, if you just actually look up the presenter's post there is a link that will show you what current symbols are supported on the stock side. Fantastic. All right. Yep, good deal there. Okay, well, that's great. Well, if there's other questions, we're happy to stick around, but otherwise, we always thank you guys for joining us. We wanted to kind of keep this short and sweet, as it is pretty straightforward. If you're looking at those levels and they resonate with you, here's the information: simplertrading.com/voodoo. All you got to do is just type that into your browser and you will be good to go. And yeah, you'll start looking at these things in a much different way, because you'll be able to anticipate reversals, which is impossible. Like, it's impossible to do that with indicators. But with levels like this that have proved themselves over and over again, it's very possible. So you can actually plan for that stuff in advance, which is about the greatest edge you can get in trading. So it's pretty good stuff. All right, guys, I think we actually got most of the questions. We'll stick around a little bit if there's any more. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. I'll leave this page up here so you can actually find the website, of course, and the website is this link right here. And then otherwise, you guys have a fantastic night. Of course, we had the FOMC today. That was a little crazy. And then tomorrow, we got the last 2 days of quadruple witching. So it will not be a dull couple of days. Yes, Lance, there will be some as you guys, if you guys are getting this, there'll be some additional information that comes out via email for the deep dive class. Of course, the time is there, but you'll get, of course, a link that you can get, and then as well as the live trading.
And the great thing about the lineup we have for the live trading, I know there was a question earlier about whether Danielle uses these. Absolutely, she uses them. I see her trades based on them, and Henry is has been doing a lot recently with a lot of his ratios and unbalanced flies that where he depends pretty heavily on the Voodoo lines as the levels he wants to defend for those spreads. So and of course I'll be there. I trade against the Voodoo lines all day long. So you're getting a group of folks who have strategies that they've been just using and using and using against these levels. So so it really is a great group that that we've got doing the live trading. So yeah, that's it should be a really good time next week.
All right, guys, fantastic. Well, again, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to leave this page up here. So, and if you guys have any questions, we're of course here. You can email us, support@simplertrading.com, or give us a call. We are hanging out here, 512-266-8659. And otherwise, you guys have a fantastic evening.